I have a philosophy that I think is important, and it relies almost entirely around habits. Habits are the things that actually help you transform your life. And to that end, makes me very happy to welcome to the show today, Jen Sincero. If you're not familiar with Jen's work, as soon as I hold this book up, you will, because this thing has sold, I think, 3 million copies. Jen Sincero is the #1 New York Times bestselling author, success coach, and motivational cattle prod. Her words, not mine, who's helped millions of people transform their personal and professional lives. Her first book, it was her first book. It was her third book, but her first one that went mega. You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. That's where I first came into touch with her work. She's inspirational. She's to the point. Her voice, her creative voice as an author is hilarious. So to the point. The tough love humor combo is something that I really respond to. And I know that's part of at least the reason that so many people have gravitated her work. And we're excited to talk about all kinds of things like transforming your life, this idea of you being a badass, what's required, how you can dump the narratives that you have in your life, maybe from a very, very young age, even, pre you remembering them, rewrite your story to help you do the things that you want. And we're also here to talk about her new book, which is called Badass Habits: Cultivate the Awareness, Boundaries, and Daily Upgrades You Need to Make Them Stick. So without further ado, it makes me very happy to welcome Jen Sincero to the show. Jen, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
New book time, right?
Oh, yeah.
How long have you been working on this one?
Oh, gosh. That question.
Perpetually, right?
Actually, I worked on this longer than most. A couple of months in the actual writing, but, many, like about a year in thinking about it and not writing it. How's that?
I know that phase too. I know it well. Thanks so much for being on the show. You've been a standout to me and those in my community for a long time. Starting with your original, that You Are a Badass, which I don't know how many millions of copies you're up to now, probably somewhere 2 or 3 or maybe more. So first, congratulations. And second, I want to start way back at the beginning of time, before you were a #1 New York Times bestseller, and when you were stuck, because for so many people, that is a primary reason that they're watching or listening. It's not just about inspiration. It's about actually moving forward and taking action, which for me was a foundational principle for You Are a Badass. But take us back so that we know that you're human, and to a time when you were stuck before all the success, and what made you write the book and get moving.
Well, the beginning of time. Wow. I, like a lot of people, had some areas of my life together and other areas were a total train wreck. So I was in a band and I was living by the beach and I was having a great time. But the money thing for me was really the big, prickly, insurmountable thorn bush, And so, I hit 40 and I was living in a garage in an alley in Venice Beach. And I was just, it was always such a drama with me. And I was like, seriously? This is the best I can do? Like Jen Sincero, like I knew I had all this energy inside of me and I knew there was all this stuff I wanted to do. And I was just sucking at the money things. So that's when I decided to really just make it a project like really do everything I knew how to do to get my money poop in a scoop. So, I started reading money books about money and wealth consciousness. And I started going to super cheesy seminars on how to be a millionaire. And I hired a coach and I took it really, really, really seriously. And I did everything I knew how to do. So that was sort of the first step of crawling out of my hole.
And what were you, so being in a band, Was
Mm.
that your source of income? Because there's so many people right now. One of the things I think is the most misunderstood in culture is how to actually transition, right? You're doing one thing. Maybe it's something that sucks. It's the thing that's got you stuck, whether you're making money off the band or you're, waiting tables or so. What was your we understand that the financial picture was doom and gloom, but what were you actually doing to even to rent that garage and, how help paint a picture for us and go from waiting tables or whatever it was that you were doing to what, toward what you aspired.
Yeah, I was a freelance writer. So, well, there were two things. I was doing pretty much anything I could do, but most of all, before I moved to Venice, I worked at a record company and I did ad copy. So I would write like Ozzy Osbourne's new album rips your head off with blah, blah. So I was an ad copywriter, and I was doing that now freelance in California when I moved there, and it was very you know not steady work, shall we say. So that was super trickly. And then I would just get any other freelance writing gigs I could get my hands on, just, writing articles or, writing anything. But as a lot of freelance writers know, you spend a lot of time hustling. And for me, writing it's pretty painful and takes me a long time. So when I really did the math, I was getting paid like $2 an hour between the hustling and the torturing myself over the writing and doing the actual writing. So that was not at all a good plan on getting rich. And then the other thing I was doing is I sort of stumbled into this women's entrepreneurial group that was called Ladies Who Launch. And I became a facilitator. And it was basically me and 10 women in a room. And we would sort of brainstorm their ideas on how to get their businesses off the ground, which was super fun and is sort of how I got my toe in the door to be a life coach. But it also, I made like maybe $1,000 a month doing it. So it was really pretty grim.
enough to pay the rent in the garage, probably, but not much more than that. Well, part of what I know about your work, and again, I'm very excited to talk about your new book, which is around habits. But before we get to habits, I want to establish some foundations of what my experience of your work is. And again, the people who are listening and watching out there, they identify as creators and entrepreneurs and people that want to take responsibility to transform their personal and professional lives. And at the core of so many issues for me and the people in this community and others like us is the excuses. And you talk a lot about, especially in your early work, about excuses and about stories. And these are stories that we tell ourselves, and most of which are not based in fact, but based in self-loathing or frustration, or to the point where you were stuck in the garage. So I'm wondering if you can explain in your the Jen Sincero philosophy, what role do stories and excuses play for keeping us stuck, and then how do we get out of it?
Well, this is why we always say that awareness is the key to transformation, right? Because we get so stuck in our stories and so stuck in our excuses that we don't even realize we're doing it, right? We take them as fact and as the truth of my situation. So, for me, back in the garage, I was like, I suck at making money. I'm in my 40s. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's just not in the cards for me. And it wasn't until I like had to like crack open my brain to see outside of that story. Because the other thing is we get really attached to these stories, even when they suck and when they're not making our lives fun and productive, because there's familiarity in them. And that's when, this whole thing about getting outside of your comfort zone, it really is about getting outside of your familiarity zone, because a lot of times that familiarity zone is not comfortable. The garage was not that comfy. So we fear going into the unknown. It's the great terror of all human existence, is the unknown. Even when the unknown could be leaps and bounds better than the known, we tend to cling to the known. And that's where these stories and excuses come in handy, is they keep us safely tucked away in these known spaces. So a really huge first step in changing your life is busting yourself on the stories you're telling yourself that you've really taken on as the truth. It's a really interesting and very sobering thing to do, because it gives you all the power. If you created the story, you can create a new story.
What's the first step in doing that? But I guess the second step, if the first step is awareness, and I have both the benefit and the dubious experience of my wife is a mindfulness and meditation coach and teacher. So this concept of awareness, I'm asking for a friend, as they say. Like what's the second step? Because I think, and again, this is where I have heard and experienced and seen so many people like, okay, great. So I'm not telling myself the right story. I'm aware that the living in a garage is not where I want to be, and I'm aware that I am foundationally capable of changing it. If not me, who?
Right.
And then you look at all of the things you could possibly do, and it's paralysis through analysis. And I want to not waste my time because I've wasted, fill in the blank years, and I want to make my next action perfect. And we know that that's not true. But what helped you? If the first one is awareness, what are steps 2 and 3?
Okay. So, and I want to actually start with step 1 quickly. How you get awareness of what your story is to really listen to the words that fly out of your mouth, and listen, and also listen to what your friends say. You tend to hang out with people who are at the same level. So if you and your friends, for me, we were always bitching about how expensive everything was and how hard it was to make money. And for me, I discovered back in the day that like the number one phrase that I used like a million times a day was, I can't afford it. And so the specifics are the things that will always set you free. So having this vague idea that I want to make more money and I want to be able to do more things, that's very vague, but we've got to get into specifics. So the first step is to become aware of what your specific story is and what the words and thoughts are around your number one complaint. So get those specifics down. So mine was, I can't afford it. So once I busted myself on that, and once I made the hell bent for glory decision to get over myself and to start making some money, I did everything I knew how to do. So this is the other thing that's so important to remember is like, you got where you are by doing what you know how to do. So, and that's all you can do, right? Because when you're transforming your life, you're going somewhere that you ain't never been before. So you're not
Right.
supposed to know how to do it. But the universe demands that you do everything you know how to do. So for me in the garage, in my little schleppy life, what I knew how to do was to read books on money. I was like, yeah, well, I should probably educate myself on money. So I started reading books about money. I started going to money making seminars, like anything with a dollar sign or the word money. I was there. I didn't care. I didn't care what it was. So through these books and through these seminars, I started learning about the stories, and I busted myself on I can't afford it. And one of the first steps I took, and this sounds so woo-woo and so stupid, but it was a game changer for me and for a lot of my clients moving forward, was writing this mantra. And so I wrote a mantra against my number one story, which was I can't afford it. And actually in Badass Habits, I lay out this whole procedure for writing a mantra. It's not that hard, but you just take the specific words of I can't afford it and you flip it around to something that calls up excitement and gives you the feeling of possibility and terror. And this is ridiculous. Who the hell am I? So for me, my opposite mantra was money flows to me easily and freely. So I went from I can't afford it to money flows to me easily and freely, because my main objections around money were it's going to be really hard for me to make it because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's just going to be a shove and a impossible. So flowing to me easily and freely seemed impossible and super exciting. So the first step for me was this mantra.
And I keep going. I think I interrupted you there. There was a little bit of a lag.
Yeah, I could talk forever.
No,
Sorry.
I love, this is like my, this show has been 10 years or 11 years running now. And the concept of long form is like, if I can keep you talking, then everybody who's listening and watching wins. So keep talking.
Dangerous statement. Here we go. So, but what I want to say too about this mantra stuff is we love to be right. Human beings love to be right. And so when I was saying I can't afford it, I didn't realize it, but I was doing everything in my power to prove that my reality about I can't afford it was right. Anybody who challenged it being like, well, Jen, you're pretty smart. You went to college. You've got a lot of ideas and talents. You could change it. I'd be like, I can't change it. I'm in my 40s. I'm living in a garage. I'm eating tuna out of a can every day. I was grouchy and I wanted to prove that I was right. So this is the whole ego getting in our way. So this is something to really watch out for. And this is the beautiful thing about the mantra is once I made the decision to change and I decided that money flows to me easily and freely was the new mantra, I still wanted to be right. But now I was proving that money flows to me easily and freely. So every time I wanted to say I can't afford it, I would make myself say money flows to me easily and freely. And I started building the foundation of my reality on that instead. So what that did was it forced me to find ways that money was flowing to me easily and freely. So, in the beginning, it was like I found $1 on the ground. I got a freelance gig out of nowhere. It was definitely picking up scraps. But the other thing it did was it opened my mind to opportunities that were always there. But I was so busy that I proving I can't afford it that I didn't see them. Right. So that's when I'm talking about you don't know how to do the things that you're going to do in your transformed life because you've never done them before. You do what you know how to do, but you stay open to possibility because possibility is there. Possibility is like waving its arm in the air, being like, yo, but you can't because you're so busy proving your old story. When you start proving a new story, you open yourself up. So one of the other main first things I did was hire a coach who specialized in women entrepreneurs making money, right? So that was me to a T. That was exactly who I was. And this coach charged literally 1/3 of my annual income, which honestly wasn't that much at the time, but for me, it was epic, right? So
Yeah.
had I been proving I can't afford it, I wouldn't have even noticed that opportunity. I would have immediately gone to I can't afford it and stayed struggling. But because money flows to me easily and freely, and because I was so hell-bent to make change, when I met her and I realized that she could help me, instead of looking for an excuse as to why I couldn't hire her, I started looking for ways to come up with that money. And that's it.
There's something that's so powerful in there, and I want to hinge this next little exchange we have around what were you saying to yourself? Was it only that money flows to me quickly and or was it something and easily?
Really?
Yes. When you take the leap to hire the coach, you're terrified, all those things. Was there clearly there's risk involved, clearly there's fear involved, clearly you're playing against your biology, your negative bias, your 40 years of conditioning, you're playing through all these things. Was it simply the mantra that gave you the courage and the power and the willingness to overcome it, or was there some other work or attributes or stuff at play? Because I'm trying to put myself in the heads of however many thousands of people are listening to this right now, and they're oh my God, that's such a bold move. I don't have that boldness within me, or it goes back to the story part. But help solve that problem for anyone who's listening.
Question. That's a great question. So no, it wasn't just the mantra, it was the decision. So I had really made the decision to change my life. And this is, I talk about this a lot in You Are a Badass, about how a lot of people make these fake decisions where we decide until it gets too scary or too expensive or you risk looking like an idiot, right? That's not a decision. That's staying in your comfort zone and, half-assing it. When you make a decision to change your life, if you are not scared out of your mind, you are doing something wrong. Absolutely, because you have to scare the crap out of yourself because the unfamiliar is terrifying for us, right? But it's funny, it's like that terror and that excitement are two sides of the exact same coin. It almost feels the same, right? So that's the feeling you're going for. So, taking huge risks, you'll know you're going in the right direction when you're equally as excited as terrified. So I was equally as excited and terrified when I met this woman. And believe me, like, I put it on a credit card. I don't even know how I got another credit card, but I just put it all on this credit card. And then like 15 minutes later, I called her back and begged her for my money back. Credit. She's like, this is probably the most important money you will ever spend in your life. And I'm such a nerd and such a straight A student. And I was so scared and I hate being in debt that I literally I did every single solitary thing she told me to do. And luckily she was a great coach, but she made me, oh my God, every day I had to do something I dreaded doing, but it kept pushing me and it kept stretching me. And it really is, it's like building any other muscle, right? Like when you go to the, you have to push yourself, you have to stretch yourself, and you have to go every day, and you have to just keep upping it. And that's all this is. It's just a muscle.
I love that I'm calling it your philosophy because I'm thinking about your entire body of work now rather than one book or the other book. Just the idea that the decision, there's wanting, and then there's theorizing and conceptualizing, and then there's actually deciding. And whether, it's an addict who's trying to get off of their particular addiction, or in your case, the stories. One thing that I feel like is that you do a nice job of talking about, which is not popular in pop culture, is to talk about our sort of family of origin. And a lot of the narratives that everyone walks around with, if there was a poster or a digital readout of everything that you're saying to yourself for the world to see, I think we would be scared, because we're all carrying a lot of baggage around. And there's a line that I remember very clearly from, I don't remember which book, but that you've said it is, we're all fucked up. And it's not our fault that we have this family of origin, because we can't choose where we come from, but it is your fault if you decide to do nothing about it.
Yeah.
So where you talk us through that, because there are people right now who know that they have, we've all got issues, as the statements it shares, but so many, it goes back to the stories that we tell ourselves, and the being stuck is that I can't do that because of, my former partner or my parents or my fill in the blank. And you do such a good job of shifting ownership to the individual.
It was really interesting when I started doing this work. I kept reading the same things over and over and over. It's like, pay attention to your word, thoughts, and beliefs, and shift your focus. And I remember thinking, come on, like, I cannot have spent the first 40 years of my life struggling, and that's all I have to do. I feel like we try to make it such a much bigger drama than it is, because there's another great excuse, right? It has to be really hard. It has to be really mysterious. And it really isn't. I mean, I'm not saying you don't have to work hard. I'm not saying you don't have to take big risks, because a lot of times you do. But there's not that much to it. And one of the best things that you can do is jar yourself, is to become the watcher, right? To pull away from your quote unquote reality that you did get from your parents. You are completely dependent on them when you're little. And so everything they teach you and show you and model for you becomes the truth. And it has to be the truth, because if they're not grounded, you're screwed, right? They are literally your lifeline to the most basic survival. So this is a very primal thing that we have to go through to detach from what our blueprint was from our family, right? Because if that's not true, holy crap, like, we have absolutely nothing to stand on. So this is why people spend entire lifetimes, withering away in realities they hate, that don't make them happy, because at least it's familiar. So it's that chutzpah to just be like, all right, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to get on totally unknown, shaky ground and create the reality that I desire, instead of the one that I was handed, because the one I was handed isn't working for me. So it really is that decision and that agreement to get super uncomfortable. But you're already uncomfortable. That's sort of the cosmic joke. Like, if you don't do it, you're sitting in the wet pant load of the life that you were handed, right? So you choose.
Yeah, it's like a lesser of two evils, but it's so hard to frame that when you're in that sort of mindset of lack. And I think that's why the awareness piece that you talked about in your words, thoughts, and actions, or, as lots of people say, you want to, figure out what you prioritize, look at your bank account and your calendar, and that will tell you sort of what headspace you're in.
Yeah.
So as we think about how to change, and this, is related to your new book, Badass Habits, Cultivate the Awareness, Boundaries, and Daily Upgrades You Need to Make Them Stick. If we took a flyer and it doesn't matter if we have success or failure on that, just the first step of getting unstuck, what I always think of when the word habit comes is like, how do you make something automatic? Because doing something once does not an automatic make. So, the concept of breaking free or jumping out of the plane with the parachute or whatever, ridiculous analogy we can put forward, it doesn't actually equal making it stick. And especially if the first, your first foray to getting uncomfortable, you eat a shit sandwich, that you're not motivated or you're disincentivized to do it again. And yet you realize that, just like the gym analogy that you meant, working your muscle, you can't actually get unstuck. You can't actually make something permanent without it. You can't create the success or the dream that you have for yourself without some sort of foundational habit. So is this just more of the same, or is there something that unlocks this for us in your new book?
Well, I do go deeper and do a couple things that I just touch on in the other books. And what I tried to do with my habit book, like, there's no lack of great books on how to form new habits out there, in my opinion. But what I wanted to do was to bring in a lot of things that I felt like all those books didn't go deeply enough into, which I actually feel like are the most important parts. And that would be your identity. It's actually the groundwork beneath the action. So I think a lot of times, like when you go on a diet, it's all about what you're eating and exercising and all that. And that is obviously very important. But the mindset behind it is far more important because that's what's going to make it stick. So I do a lot of mindset work, and I also put in, it's almost like a course, because I feel like reading about all the ways to shift your habits is one thing, but actually doing it as you're reading the book. I really wanted people to get results and to put it into practice while they were reading. So those are the sort of two things that I hopefully am bringing that will help people really stick to these habits. But this piece of identifying as the person you want to become before you get there, I think is so crucial. And it's something I talk about a lot because, there's always that thing that they say when people win the lottery. If, people win the lottery and they almost always go right back to where they started before they had the lottery money they won, right? And the reason for that is because their outward reality changed. They suddenly now have ass loads of cash, but they still identify as somebody who is broke if they were broke when they won the money. And that identity informs all their habits. So if you shift your identity, your habits, you have a much better chance of sticking with your habits. So, for example, I love cigarettes. It is literally really one of my favorite things. And I plan on beginning smoking again when I'm 85. So it's really giving me some, it's really the dangling carrot. I can't wait. But I haven't touched a cigarette in like 30 years. And for me, and I had tried quitting a million times over and over, I made bets with my friends, I ended up paying many kegs to people who I promised I was going to quit.
Peg and kegs. I like it. You're going to show up with like 22 kegs.
They kept the entire state of Colorado drunk for years. But it wasn't, first of all, it wasn't until I made the decision, like the really hardcore decision that, okay, enough of this shit. Like, it's so painful. There were a couple of things working for me. One was I hate quitting. Like, it's so hard to quit. Even if you quit for like 2 months, then you start smoking again, and you got to quit again. Like, I hated that process. And I also hated having something have control over me. Like, I couldn't sit through a whole movie because by the end I was jonesing so bad that I had to leave to go have a cigarette, and that drove me nuts. So those are sort of my two, and also, I'm basically voluntarily killing myself, and it's disgusting. But so I had sort of my specifics down on why I wanted to quit and the emotion behind it. And then what I did was I shifted my identity from somebody who is a smoker who's trying to quit to a non-smoker. So, and that little shift was epic, because when you're still identifying as somebody who's a smoker, but you're trying to quit, you're still negotiating with, well, maybe I'll just have a drag of a cigarette, or, it's New Year's Eve, I'm going to be drinking a lot, I'm just going to smoke tonight, but tomorrow I'm going to quit. There's always that negotiation because you still identify as somebody who smokes. When you stop identifying as that person and identify as somebody who's healthy and takes care of their body, you don't even enter into those negotiations. It's like negotiating when you wake up in the morning if you're going to have a bottle of vodka for breakfast. If that's not your identity, it doesn't even come in to your radar. And so this identity piece is so huge because it knocks at that negotiation is where we all fall flat on our faces. When you're lying in bed and it's freezing out and you're negotiating whether you're going to go to the gym or not, or whether you're negotiating whether you're going to eat that entire cherry pie, it's all, if you don't identify, you don't negotiate. And it makes it's just honestly far more than anything you can set up in the physical world. That identity will get you where you want to go so much faster and help you stay there.
I completely understand, identify, agree. Like this, the like who you see yourself as is perhaps the most valuable asset. And that, brings us directly to mindset, which is where I think the bulk of your work is. And, as you said, there's so many great books out there on habits, and most of them have to do with, setting up your external inputs as favorable to you. So you take, in your case, do not have cigarettes around, or change the group of people that you hang out with, or those are, I think that is commonly understood and certainly effective. But what other aspects of the mindset piece go beyond identity and is in an area of which I think you said you've done a ton of work. So help us understand. I'm also, to me, mindset is the most important thing, because if you look at the world's top performers in literally any category, golf to chess to topiary gardeners, like the way that they talk to themselves, the mental fitness is clearly the thing that separates the best in the world, right? What makes one, tennis player better than the other? It's they can hit the ball roughly the same speed with the same accuracy. So for you, what other aspects besides identity are do you find are critical and at play in changing your life?
I wrote a ton in this book also about boundary setting. And I think that is sort of a very overlooked, in my experience, aspect of a lot of this mindset work. And especially when you're actively, taking the plunge to transform your life, this boundary piece is so important. And it's boundaries with yourself, like showing up for your sweet self, and making it clear to those around you that you need the space and time and encouragement that you need to change your life. And it's interesting because once again, we have these, corpses that we're dragging around from our childhoods and all of the input that we get in, that, we are a bad person if we set boundaries, or it's not safe to set boundaries, or, there's lots of different kinds of boundaries. I think that we think a lot about the one where we just say yes to everything, but there's also saying no to things that you want to say yes to. And there's also being murkily enmeshed in other people's lives where you're trying to control them or you're letting them control you. So there's all sorts of lovely ways you can screw yourself over with the boundary thing. But I think it really, again, is, clarity and specifics set everybody free. And when it comes to outlining where you end and the rest of the world begins, when it comes to changing your life, and again, it's so simple. It really is just, getting clear on what your needs are and getting clear on why you're grouchy and resentful and passive aggressive. It's probably because you have crappy boundaries. So getting clear on what would serve you and thereby lift everybody else up is another huge mindset piece that I think is super important to pay attention to.
I love the word from the subtitle of the book. Again, for those who are, if it's ambiguous at all, we're talking about Jen's new book, Badass Habits, Cultivate the Awareness, Boundaries, and Daily Upgrades. You need to make them stick. I love the concept of an upgrade because it's not a I'm in left field and I need to go into the bleachers, or I'm, in Africa and I need to go to Canada. An upgrade, it's like I'm in row 9 and I need to get to row 5. It's not, it's sort of, there's a nice, it's a compartmental mindset, if you will, around what's possible. How intentional, was that word choice? And can you explain, how you approach that in not just in the book, but in life, so that these things are, that transformation is more easily achievable?
I did not think of the way you just articulated it when I was writing it, and I love that. So I maybe
take it. It's yours. You said it.
Yes. I wanted the reason, because that is a huge part of that book, is the bite-sized chunks that I break it down into. So, we've been talking a lot about mindset and all that stuff, but I also give you the daily tasks to put these pieces in place along with the mindset. And I hopefully do all of it in really manageable pieces, because throughout my life as a person trying to get their act together and also as a coach, I am convinced the number one killer of all dreams is overwhelm. You start and you're like, how the hell am I going to lose 50 pounds and get a 6-pack on my chest? Like, it could seem so impossible. So if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, anything is possible. So I love that definition of upgrade. And when I put that in the subtitle, I wanted to make it clear that there were daily upgrades in this book, that it's almost a course. Like you get all the juicy mindset how-to in the first half of the book, and then there's a 21-day upgrade course that you take in the second half of the book. And now I've forgotten your question. But
no, you're nailing it. It's just like the concept of an upgrade. And to me, it was like proximity and possibility. I think the way that what I took away from your answer there is that it's sort of a more emphasis on the daily habit, because if you're doing something daily, it almost by definition, it's not what I'm going to be in 10 years. It's what I'm going to do today and tomorrow and the next day for 21 days. I was fascinated with the structure. I think it's a cool structure for a book. And speaking of overwhelm, right now, people are saying, or lots of people may be saying or have thought, like, oh my God, the concept, even the words like transform, I had that in the title of my book as well, transform your life. It just sounds like, oh shit, I got to put a backpack of stuff on and climb a mountain. And when I get there, I got to do 1,000 push-ups and I might not even make it, versus this concept of bite-size, habit-oriented. And if overwhelm is one of the biggest obstacles, I want to give you a shout out for the structure of the book, which, as I'm a creator, and so I have the crazy brain, but crazy brain without a little bit of structure to me is a recipe for not well articulated thought. And I love the structure. So nice moves there. How do you think it manages the overwhelm? Is it just because you just got a list of shit to do in front of you for the day, and we're going to manage overwhelm through getting up and just, instruction 1, instruction 2, instruction 3? Or I'm putting words in your mouth now, but tell me how you thought about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I really, I'm pretty impatient. That is definitely my, quest in life here. I'm not a patient person. I'm from New York. I want my, whatever. So when I write, I really try to be economical with my writing, because I think, especially in the second half of the book, I want people to get her done. I don't think they need to read 20 pages per day to get the information they need. I just want to give it to them as quickly and pithily. Is that a word?
And we're going with it.
Okay, as possible. So yeah, I did that very intentionally. Was really try to boil it down so that they could get the information they need to then take the action that you need to take, and just take it one day at a time. One day at a time is a really beautiful philosophy.
I don't know if, what role this still plays for you, but I'm going back to some of your earlier work and the role of journaling. It just seems like the more we look around the world, or those who are invested in helping, transform themselves or live a life that's inspiring to them, tap into their dreams, whatever the phrase is, it just seems like writing stuff down
Mm.
is has value. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking again back to your OG book, You're a Badass, the original. It, journaling, the role it played a significant role, and I'm wondering, has that transformed for you over time? Are you doubling down on it? Are you divorcing yourself from that? How, where does that hold space in your brain today?
I'm sitting here thinking, should I lie?
No,
I
or even if you've moved on, and now it's just about a daily practice, and
Yeah.
journaling is not part of that. Like, and look, I advocate writing, and I didn't write today, so
It's interesting. My relationship with writing is talk about drama. But I will say that I'm a huge advocate of journaling, 100%. And I have clients who have to do it every day, where they just spew, and it totally. I think seeing your thoughts down on a page is profoundly helpful and very transformative. Like, you can start channeling things that you don't even know you felt, that when you start getting free form, and then you look at it and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that was going on. So I stand behind journaling 100%. Whether or not I personally do it every day is a different story, but I will tell you, when I'm really working through something and I'm in that space where I'm done and I'm making a decision, I journal my ass off. So I'm much more of a sprint runner. Like, I write my books in a couple of months. I do, and then I go backpacking for a couple of months. Like, I'm a big on-off person. That's my balance. And I guess it's the same with journaling. But I believe in the power of writing, and I have found that almost everything I write comes true. And that is this sort of witchy weirdness. So I've just always been like, I gotta, you
no,
know.
keep talking. I want, we need the witchy weirdness. Keep going. What do you mean by that? That's a big statement.
So when going way back, my very first book, Don't Sleep with Your Drummer, I had written a story about being in a rock band, and I was getting screwed over by the record company in the story in a billion different ways. And my publisher ended up screwing me over in the exact same way, and ended up using the exact same words that I had the record producer use with the band. Like, it was making my hair stand up. And with You Are Badass, I had another really unfortunate thing with the publisher, and I had to be such a badass. Like, I had to take the biggest, scary leap. It ended up, it's a very long story, but I had a book deal, and then we had a huge creative conflict, and I had to we couldn't find common ground. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give you your advance back, and I'm going to self-publish this thing. And I was terrified because I knew myself, and I was like, I'm not interested in being a self-publisher. I was so depressed, but I had to do it because we just could not agree. And I wasn't going to put my name on something I wasn't proud of. And I had to be a total badass, and I had to do everything that I had written about in that damn book. And then we ended up working it out. And with Badass Habits, this is such a crazy story, but I went to a psychic recently. And I've been having a lot of trouble with my right leg. My hip, I might need a hip replacement. There's all this stuff going on with my leg. But I've also been like, okay, so what are my beliefs about flexibility and moving forward? And, I'm doing all the woo-woo stuff on it. It's like, I'm going to hire this psychic and just see if she can help me sort of figure out what I'm emotionally contributing to this pain in my right side. And so she does this whole thing where she's like talking to the ancestors before we start talking. And she's, oh yeah. And this is all over the phone. So I don't know who she is. She doesn't know who I am. And then while she's talking to the ancestors, she's like, come on. And then, whatever. And then she breaks their connection, and then she's talking to me. And then she's like, okay, well, now I'm going to tell you that thing they said that I thought was so funny. And I was like, what was it? And she goes, it's actually, your hip is fucked, But one of the reasons that it's going down your whole leg is because you have a bad ass. It's your glute muscles. It's not the knee muscle, the knee or the thigh. It's your bad ass. And I was like, oh my God, I've been writing books called Badass for almost 10 years. And now it has come true. So
Wow.
take that for what it is. But now I'm like rolling around on tennis balls, and it's all happening in the glutes today.
It's all in the ass.
Yeah.
But I want to keep pulling on this thread a little bit. You talked about earlier. You said the words "woo woo," and you've made some subtle comments about whether or not that this is. It seems like you're saying, I'm not sure if this is viable or what, but there's clearly there's something at work there, right? And as someone who I choose to pay attention to coincidence like that, for example, versus reject it, and I think life's more interesting when we do that. But to be crystal, like the science is starting to understand the role that postulating and manifesting and visualizing, for example, tons and tons of studies. For the one that is most commonly cited is the free throws, the basketball free throws. There are a group of people who shot free throws every day. There's a group who didn't shoot free throws every day, but just visualized it. And then there's a group that did both. And the group that did not shoot a free throw were better than the people who only shot free throws every day. So clearly visualization and whether you couch it in quantum physics or Dr. Joe Dispenza or wherever you're couching it, this is a thing for you, right? And it's a thing for you, Jen. And what is your relationship with this? I don't know if it's spirituality or quantum physics or however you personally want to assign it, but I don't want you to discount that stuff because I also have learned to pay attention to it. I think it's valuable. What's your role? What's the relationship with those thoughts? Clearly you called the psychic, right? So there's something there.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad you're busting me on my snarkiness that I still have around it, even though I 100% subscribe and I call myself a witch. I believe in all of it. I have seen it work over and over, but I'm still just the tiniest. You know what I think it is? And this is completely, I don't know. I feel like it's got an unfortunate brand. I live in Santa Fe now. It's like, it's a little much. So I'm still, I don't know.
You upgraded from Venice, the Venice psychics to.
I know. However, I have totally drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm just as guilty. So I am going to knock that off right now. Make a habit of embracing my woo-ness. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think, I don't know when this is going live, but I'm assuming the pandemic is still going to be happening.
For sure. I think we're doing your book drops on December 1st. So we're trying to go live in your book week because we know that that's super important for people to buy books to support authors in their launch week. So we're going to try and time it with that. But yes, the pandemic will be raging.
Yes. Okay. The raging pandemic. So I have personally found, because of the way my incredibly blessed and charmed life, just as I live it now, everything is slowed down. Some people have 10 times more responsibilities and kids at home, and I'm not pretending that it's not happening for people. But for me, I have found, because everything has slowed down so much and because I'm so much less distracted by going out and traveling and doing all the things that I usually do, the veil is so much thinner for me. And I am having, the things that I think about and visualize and say out loud and write down manifest so quickly. It's making my hair stand up. And I'm a little grabby about this time because I feel like it's so juicy and I really want to strengthen my muscle with it and deepen my relationship with that flow. And it's been just, and it's always available to us. But I feel like right now it's almost like I'm living in a monastery because I'm in the middle of nowhere and I've got so little going on. I am getting ready for my book launch and all that stuff, but comparatively speaking, everything's calmed way down, and it's really exciting.
All right, so you're give me one more layer on that if I can push on it. That
Mhm.
is like, so you described it as woo and you believe it and you're reluctant to admit it, but now you're okay, cool. I'm over that. Today's the day. Um, can you share some, like, I think talking to a psychic is one thing. Um, what are some other tools that you use specifically to reinforce it, or do you use none and just agree that the universe is working for us, not against us? Like, are there some practices that you have that aren't in your books, or if you were scared to admit them, that you might be willing to admit to us today?
Oh, I wish I had something really embarrassing.
Juicy.
I know.
No, it can be big. I think most of the stuff is banal, right? But like, I visualize every day, or like, what are some of the tools, if you employ any, to tap into that? You called yourself a witch. You like, what are the practices? Because you've got plenty of names for all this stuff, woo woo witch, all these things. But what are the practices that you engage in to tap into it?
Good old meditation is by far the best one for me personally. And I do think journaling is a form of meditation, but just sitting quietly and getting into that blank space, and then when I'm not actually actively meditating, calling back that blank space as often as I can be aware of it during the day. When I'm having a conversation with somebody, or when something's happening to me, to really try and step aside and again be that watcher, and get out of my reaction mode and get into a responding mode where I'm catching myself in the knee jerk, the pre-programmed thing, as opposed to getting out of victim mode of the situation and responding, and not taking everything personally, and just having a more playful relationship with the environment that I find myself in, if that makes sense. But it
Oh,
really, yeah, I guess it's mostly the stepping aside and becoming the watcher instead of having the fight in the sandbox with whatever's going on.
that's
Um,
such a powerful thing. Like, for those folks who don't meditate, that is long been sort of hashed out, or uh, witnessed or shared about meditation. I'm personally a TM guy, but what Jen's talking about, for those who this might be new, is one of the aspects of meditation that it's like a muscle that strengthens is when something bad happens, someone cuts you off in traffic, it's like time slows down, and rather than you like giving the finger to the person who cut you off, there's a gap that allows you to choose how to respond rather than react. And I describe it as like the world happening in slow motion. I don't have the answer. If I'm just quiet for a second, I have a thoughtful answer, and that makes us better. So I think that's incredible, that space that meditation creates. Is there anything else? Or I have a terrible feeling that I cut you off just a little bit there because of the lag.
No, I mean, and I also sitting and visualizing, really getting clear on the specifics. Again, it's all about specifics, where when you've got an issue or a problem or something you want to heal, just vision, let's take my leg, like spending time sending light to my leg and visualizing my ass, whatever is going on, but taking the time to visualize what I desire. And the nice thing about that is, not only does it help you, help manifest it coming into physical creation, but it also pulls up objections. So if you're visualizing something that has always been hard for you, or that you've tried a million times and failed at, and you're like, all right, I'm going to visualize it because I'm going to get down with this woo woo stuff and I'm going to make it happen for myself. And you start getting into the specifics and visualizing it, and it feels great, and you're sailing along, and then all of a sudden, like the monster of, oh, as if you could lose 20 pounds, you've done it a trillion times, it always comes back, like all of the doubt, fear, and worry, and your past proof comes up. So what a gift, because then you now have specific beliefs and words and thoughts that you can now use to your advantage, because until you know the specifics of what your personal objections are, you're still a victim to them. So it gives you that awareness.
Love it. Love it. So I just got one more topic I want to go down the path with you around. And the concept of habits is obviously it's the source of your new book. You've talked about how the ecosystem sort of you felt like it was incomplete, which is one of the reasons you wrote the book. And if what do you think your contribution to that discourse around habits is? What's your largest contribution? And ultimately, this is the thing that I believe is going to make people want to buy this book versus something that hasn't stuck for them in the past. So, what's sort of the nutshell of the approach that you're crafting here? To me, well, I'll save my commentary for after. Just what's the pitch?
Well, I feel like, can I have three?
Mm-hmm. It's
Bye.
your show, Jen. You got as many as you want. You can have 38 if you want.
Okay, so first two, I feel like we touched upon where
The
I
daily,
really
yeah.
go deeply into the mindset stuff in the first half and stress how important that is and give people tools to shift their identity and set good boundaries and all that. And then the second thing is the course, where I boil everything down into bite-sized pieces. I give you actual steps to take one easy day at a time so that you can start implementing this stuff instead of just reading the whole book and then being like, great, now I got to start this habit. The third thing that I think I bring to this stuff is a different voice, where it's got memoir and it's got humor and hopefully a lot of humiliating, relatable stories that, really help you see yourself and give you hope that you can overcome stuff too, because the people I'm writing about, and which is usually myself, have overcome it too. But just to make it more of a relatable read as opposed to something that might be a little bit more scientific or how-to kind of thing.
Your voice is my favorite thing about your writing. Obviously, it's laden with like real practical, tangible, tactical stuff, but to find myself laughing out loud and to be willing to buy anything that you put out in the world because it's laced with humor and humility and all of that. I think ultimately that's probably why we gravitate to any artist, right? We like their voice, whether it's visually or maybe there's other reasons, but certainly for me, that is something that is so stand out about you and your work. So I want to take a second and personally thank you for that. And my last question is for not just the writers out there, because this is about writing, but for all of the creators and the entrepreneurs. Talk to us about your creative process. You mentioned being a sprinter. You said you like to write these things, and then you is it like ebb and flow? I'm part of my mission in life is to understand the creative process from the world's best creators, and they're all over the map, right? Some people only work on Tuesdays for 2 hours, and some people sit down from 9 to 5 and paint a picture for us. Now that we're hooked on the book, I want to know how you work.
Well, first there's the sweatpants. I mean,
Go back to voice here. Here we are, right back into your voice. I love it.
Oh man, it's funny. I think this is my sixth book, and I am, whatever. It's worked, so I'm not trying to change it. But I kind of envy those people who can get up, write for a couple hours in the morning and then go have lunch with a friend and have a life outside of it. I am, as I said, that sprint runner where I'm thinking about it. And the nice thing about it being my sixth book is I know how it goes now. So I don't spend the first, publisher usually gives you about 8 months or so. I don't know, that's what mine do. I don't spend the first, 6.5 months freaking out about my book and trying to write it and torturing myself and pulling out my hair. I travel or I, go on a hiking trip or whatever. I'm thinking about it and I'm taking notes, but I know myself and I am not going to sit my ass down in that chair until I've got a month to a month and a half of terror and panic and a giant deadline looming over me, because that's how I focus best. And that's just how I do it. So now I know that. And so I just, I get the room ready, I get the outfit ready, and then I just hunker down. And I also, it's funny, especially with this book, especially during the pandemic and just everything being so weird. I always go into kind of a fugue state. I don't know if you have this experience, but a lot of times I'll write something and I will not remember that I wrote it. So it's been really interesting now that I'm starting to do podcasts for this book and talk about the book and the specifics of the book. I'm so grateful that I also narrated it recently, because when I was narrating it, I was like,
There's some good stuff in here.
so yeah.
So if the room is the kitchen table and the outfit are the sweats, what other inputs are there in your world that you have? Do you write with music on in the background? Do you write early in the morning, late at night? Do you like to have a green tea matcha smoothie? Like what's some other accoutrements with your process?
I usually, now I hire somebody to cook for me because food is always an issue. I hate going to the grocery store anyway, but when I'm writing a book, I definitely have somebody make healthy food for me, because then I've become this major ice cream addict lately too. Like, I have so much ice cream in my refrigerator. It's terrifying. But I make sure I have lots of stuff. Like, I feel like whatever it takes to get this book done is fair play. So I don't care, whatever it is, I get to have it. So with the ice cream, that's my big thing. I call, everybody in my life has to just understand that it's not personal, but they will not be hearing from me at all. Except when I call them weeping at 2:00 in the morning, thinking, I can't do this. What else? I do write all over the house. I always have an office. And another thing that I do that I love that has been so helpful, those huge, they're like gigantic Post-it notes that have sticky stuff on the back. So I find it really helpful. This is sort of a visualization thing too. Like, I always outline the crap out of my book before I write it, but then I need to sort of see the whole thing, because as you know, there's always so much information that could easily fit into different chapters. So for me, it's so good to be able to see the actual book all around me visually, and then I can take note cards and move the little pieces of information in different chapters. Like, each note card is a chapter, and then I can move the information around there. So I have one room that's it's like walking into the guts of my book. So that's been a really helpful tool for me.
Oh, I love that. I wrote my first book a year ago. It came out in the fall, and the same thing was, so I'm a very visual person, lifelong photographer, visual artist. And so writing slow and painful. I'd done books before, but they were visual books, not like word books. Same thing. It was crazy. Like, to have, you're working on it in bite-sized chunks, because that's how you write, right? You can't write a chapter with 5 keystrokes. So to be able to see how all the ideas fit together and make sense was so helpful. Right? Yellow stickies, though, the giant yellow stickies, that's a new one. I'm taking notes on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your process and the ideas behind your new book. And again, for those, this is the book, Holidays. This is a fantastic gift. Badass Habits, Cultivate the Awareness, Boundaries, and Daily Upgrades you need to make them stick. Beginning of December. I think that's just, close. That's like 2 weeks from now. Congrats on the book.
Thank you so much.
And the very last thing that I would like to leave our listeners and watchers with is on page 244 of a book. I'm not going to tell the readers which book, of a book. There's one phrase, and I want to know what you meant. The phrase is, "You can have it all." What did you mean by that? I'll just say it was at the end of one of the books. You can have it all.
Because, listen, I am obsessed with the idea that right now we are all on a planet in infinite space. And I find that so comforting in a way. I mean, it's utterly terrifying also, but it's all ridiculous. It's all this experience, this cartoon of being a human being in life on planet Earth, like all the little minutia and, like, I can't get my iPhone to work, or all the stuff that we get, like the fact that my guy is vacuuming the pond right now while I'm finishing up all these little irritations, right? That happen that we get so attached to and get in there. When you remember to look outwards and look at the expanse of possibility, and the fact that you are even born is bananas, what it took for you to be born, all of the humans that had to come together and the timing and everything like that. It's a miracle. So if that can happen, you can do anything, because that's impossible too. So I really believe that.
No better place to end a podcast. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thanks for inspiring so many millions and millions. Congrats on the new book. It's stunning, and your new take on habits is super helpful. I know it's going to be well received, and just want to say thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a joy. You're an amazing person to talk to, so I really appreciate it. It makes
awesome. Well, we got to make sure the people out there buying the book, again, this help Jen out, because if you buy the book, especially right when you hear this, just click, go click on your local bookstore's website or any of the big boxes and get it. Cause we want, what Jen's first book was only on the New York Times list for 4.5 years. So she's really struggling. Let's get our community out and support her. Thanks so much again for being on the show, Jen. Looking forward to seeing the book on the shelves.
Yeah, thanks so much.